The dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary was, at first, a rather successful pioneer in aviation, with individuals such as Ego Dietrich making great strides in the field, going on to design the first mass-produced military aircraft of Germany, the Dietrich Taube, which itself would go on to be the first aircraft to drop bombs in combat during the Italo-Turkish War of 1911. But that's a story for another day. Even with this head start, Austria was unable to advance much further due to a chronic lack of interest in the new machines and a hyper-traditionalist military culture. From this, Austria began the war with one of the smallest air forces of the 5 initial major powers, with only 10 balloons, 85 pilots, and 39 operational aircraft, a comparable number to that of the Ottoman Empire. Surprisingly, after the outbreak of the war, in the obvious showcase of how critical air power would be to the outcome of the conflict, Austria would still be slow to ramp up aircraft production, resulting in ad hoc factories lacking assembly lines or any form of streamlined manufacturing processes, mostly using German-bought and designed aircraft with mostly Albatros fighters as the backbone of their air force, and a noticeable absence of aircraft able to bomb enemy positions. With Italy's entrance into the war, things began to change within the Austrian high command. Up to that point, Austria had only had to face Russian aircraft and pilots, which performed rather poorly, especially with bombing, giving the perception to Austria that such investments into dedicated bombers were unnecessary to win the war, and overall a waste of material, as a Hansa-Brandenburg C.1 two-seater fighter was able to be used as a bomber when needed. However, effective and successful Italian bombing raids would quickly shift the Austrian attitude, and they would request a new bomber from the German-based Hansa-Brandenburg Aircraft Company, which had been founded by Ego Dietrich himself back in 1912. The eventual aircraft delivered would be the Hansa-Brandenburg G.1, designed by Ernst Heinkel, who would eventually design some of the most prolific bombers of the Third Reich. The G.1 bomber had 2 engines mounted in a rather unconventional way. Rather than the standard wing mounting, Ernst Heinkel had the engines mounted to the fuselage by employing the use of steel struts, which not only increased the weight and drag, but also transferred the vibrations of the engines to the airframe rather than the wings, leading to a rather uncomfortable ride for the crew and unnecessary strain on the airframe. This is probably a result of Heinkel's inexperience in multi-engine aircraft design, more than anything, as the benefits of mounting the engines in such a way don't appear to exist, but no one's sure. It would be crewed by 3 people, one serving as the pilot in a shared cockpit with the bombardier, who himself would also man the forward gun. On top of this, there was a dedicated gunner in an isolated position manning the rear-facing gun. The length of this fuselage would stretch a total of 9.8 meters, or 32 feet, and be supported by 2 wings with a maximum span of 18 meters, or 59 feet. This, along with the engines, would allow a total weight of 2,740 kilograms, or 6,040 pounds. Included in this was a total useful load of just over 1,000 kilograms, around 2,000 pounds. Early G1s suffered from a weak undercarriage, which led to several accidents involving the first few aircraft produced. While this one issue was eventually rectified, structural issues with the overall design would persist throughout its existence, leading to many of the eventual losses suffered by the G1 fleet throughout the war, with landing gear failure being a culprit in many accidents even as late as 1918, which would contribute to the poor reputation the bomber would gain during the conflict. Although the first flight of the G1 was in early 1916, the first batch of 6 aircraft, bought at a cost of $150,000 each, or $2.5 million today, wouldn't be delivered until March of 1917. This small fleet was almost immediately grounded due to contractual disputes in Germany, leaving possible spare part availability up in the air. When the disputes were finally resolved, Austria would receive further aircraft before lowering their ordered number. 3 squadrons were equipped with the G1, and a replacement unit was created, all based at Devacca Airfield on the Italian front. Immediately, Austrian pilots and aircrews began complaining about the new bomber, and most expressed their preference for the brand new Gotha G4 bomber that was just becoming available to Austria. Eventually, the lack of more than a single successful raid would force the hand of the Austrian military to relegate the G1 to training duties, leaving the bomber with a combat history of a paltry 3 months in total, which honestly was probably for the best. The 2 Austro-Daimler 6-cylinder engines gave out a total of 160 horsepower each, This gave the G1 bomber a top speed of 133 kilometers an hour, or 82 miles per hour. While not much worse than the top speed of the G4 bomber that replaced it, it had a smaller capacity for bombs and equipment, along with fewer defense armaments, making it more vulnerable. Its service ceiling, or maximum altitude, was also worse than the G4, sitting at only 4,000 meters, or 13,000 feet, leaving it far more exposed to enemy fighters. Towards the end of the war, several G1 bombers were used as a testbed for mounting large caliber cannons for ground attack, including the 50mm and 70mm Skoda cannons in the nose, with a 37mm Skoda cannon mounted in the tail gunner's position. There was one last attempt in 1918 to use the G1 as a night bomber, but the aircraft proved to be just as ineffective at this as it did during normal daytime missions, and was subsequently completely relegated training and experimental operations once again. By the end of the war, only 50 G1 bombers were delivered in total, many coming to grief in various ways during the conflict. The fate of these aircraft is unknown, and no known survivors exist. It is assumed all were destroyed after the war per the Treaty of Versailles. This is hard to confirm, however, as the G1 was so inconsequential, the Entente didn't even know it existed, so it's possible it was never seeked out. Regardless, no surviving examples have yet to be found, so it is safe to assume they have all been scrapped since the end of the war. Heinkel, for his part, would never express interest in the aircraft after the war, and he mostly ignored his first failed attempts at a multi-engine bomber before his eventual success with the Heinkel 111. While not a successful or even quality aircraft, the G1 bomber acted as a stepping stone in the path of German aircraft design, semi-paving the way for some of the most notorious aircraft of World War II. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys enjoyed, please comment, like. If you haven't subscribed, it really helps the channel and kind of keeps me motivated to continue making these videos. Hopefully I can keep doing this. I know that I haven't really uploaded one of these videos in a while. When the original plan was to do it once a week, I got really busy. There was so much stuff that happened, but I appreciate those of you who have stuck around and still support the channel and everything I'm doing.